It says meeting is now streaming live on YouTube.
Right. So what we're going to do here. Okay. So we're just going to pause here on YouTube for a minute because I need to post on our main page that we are live on YouTube and not on Facebook.
That's odd.
There's always something.
Definitely.
Okay, so we're live here, so I'm going to put that over here in this Facebook post. We're entirely flexible. We're Semper Gumby here. There, I put it in one place. We'll put it in one more place. Come over to YouTube because that's where we are.
Did you throw it up on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I should do that too on LinkedIn. 1 second here. Where's LinkedIn? On this page over here. Okay, on YouTube. Okay, so hopefully we're good all those places, and I will monitor for comments on LTI on the chat here for the YouTube channel. People are watching us there, so that's good news. Somebody found us. They may not be finding us on Facebook, but we're on YouTube. Yay!
Yay!
So welcome,
due
everybody.
to technical difficulties, we are now somewhere else.
Right. So welcome to the Leader Transition Institute Special Veterans Benefits Q&A. I'm really excited that we are doing this tonight. Thank you so much to Jane Babcock for joining us. Let me tell you a little bit about Jane. She is a highly experienced veteran service officer. She has almost 15 years experience working in taking care of veterans, both her specialty is the Vietnam era veterans, but she knows veteran issues through and through. So I'm really excited about her talking with you tonight. She also is current and up to date on what's going on with veteran benefits now. So after a long career in the military, here she is still serving. So thank you, Jane, for being with us tonight. We really appreciate you.
Glad to be here, Annie.
So I want to start out by asking you, what is the most common question that you are given about veterans benefits? What is the most common thing that people ask you?
Well, it really depends on the era.
Okay.
The younger veterans come in and they say, okay, I'm supposed to come and see you, but I don't know why.
Okay.
Other than you're going to register my DD-214, I don't know what that means. So then we start out with the whole thing. We're going to register your DD-214. If you ever have a fire or lose it or anything like that, we can get another certified copy from the Register of Deeds. So you don't have to wait the 2 years to get it from your branch of service. So you always want to have your DD-214 registered where you can get to it easily, and that's through your local county office.
So I have a question for you. Somebody like me, I think I got out in 1988, and I think I registered my DD-214 someplace. Don't know if I did or not. How would somebody who has gotten out 20 years ago, 30 years ago, know if their DD-214 is registered someplace?
Okay. Odds are, early on, they might have given you back your tissue paper copy.
I have
But a
that
lot of
one.
times they'll have stuck on the back either a stamp or a sticker that says, that it's registered in such and such a county. If there's no markings or no raised seal that indicates that it's been registered somewhere, then it may not be, or the office didn't mark it. So I've moved from place to place. I have 4 different DD214s, and I have them registered, all 4 of them locally, but I still have 2 registered back home.
So do you recommend then, if you aren't sure if you're registered, or if your DD214 isn't registered where you live, and you think that this is where you're going to probably spend the rest of your life, that it'd be a good thing to take your DD214 in and register it?
Yes, I do. Especially since most states, over 30 states now, have county veteran service officers. So you're going to go to that county office that's just for veterans, and they're going to register it. They'll give it to the Register of Deeds, who will make a certified copy to give you back, but also give that office a certified copy that they can create a file from, so that if you ever have benefit claims or your surviving spouse does, then they've got a certified copy ready to go for that claim.
Okay, awesome. Awesome. So that's something that we should be reminding everybody to do. Thank you so much for starting out with that. So then for the newer veterans. So for like the generation past them, what's their most common question?
Can I get hearing aids from the VA?
And the answer is?
The answer is yes. Even if you don't participate in the VA healthcare system, if you are eligible to enroll in that VA healthcare system, or you tried to enroll years before and they told you at that time your assets are too high, they no longer count assets. They only count your income minus any medical expenses you're experiencing. So that veteran that retired, his wife is retired, and as of January 1, your Medicare premium will be $203 each. So that gets subtracted off your supplement, any dental bills you paid last year, any doctor bills you paid last year. We can even include mileage to and from the doctor or dentist and things like that, ambulance bills. We get to subtract all that, and what's left over is your living income. And that determines what category you are in the VA. That category is going to determine whether you get all your services free, or if you pay the pharmacy, the doctor, and the specialist copays. So for $100, if you pay the specialist copay, you're going to get a set of $5,000, $6,000 hearing aids.
That's a deal.
Yes, it is. And you can enroll just to get the hearing aids. You don't have to make it part of your permanent health care. But if you have a hearing test, if you've been using your civilian doctor, your civilian health care and all that stuff, and the doc says, you should think about hearing aids. At the age of 58, I just figured it was a hearing aid company trying to sell me hearing aids. Then I went to the VA, they did a hearing test, and they said, you could use hearing aids. So it's not a matter of age sometimes, it's a matter of exposure at times. And if that exposure is military related, then it's time to file a claim for service connection. And with your CVSO or your VSO representative, as long as they're accredited, they are a veteran, they will help you do all the paperwork for free. They will help you file it. And like myself, they got the list of 100 secret backdoor telephone numbers that they can call to get things done.
Wow, that's awesome. That's a huge savings, because I know I bought from hearing aids for my mother several years ago, and they were $6,000.
Yep. And as your hearing loss progresses or your situation changes, they will issue different hearing aids. I'm on my second set.
That's wonderful. That's a huge benefit. That's a
Yes.
huge benefit. So you don't have to have any other connection with VA healthcare, but if you if you think that your hearing loss could be proven to be military related, then you can go through the VA to get them.
No, you don't have to be service connected. You used to have to be, but they found what happened. a lot of our older veterans, our Korean War guys and our World War II guys, the
Mhm.
doctor was saying, now go home and take one of these pills 3 times a day or twice a day. And they were going home and taking 2 pills. So too much of that medication at one point, in the day and stuff like that. So they said, okay, they're not hearing us. We need to make sure that we're not putting their lives at jeopardy when it comes to their own care.
So it doesn't even have to be, your hearing deficit does not have to be military affiliated. You just have to be a veteran.
Right.
That's huge. That's huge. That is huge. So, okay. So what if I'm a new veteran, just either left active duty because I've had as much fun as I want, or I have retired. After registering my DD 214, what's the most important thing that I need to do with you?
Well, the first things that you're going to get asked are, when did you serve and where did you serve?
Okay.
Because that's going to tell us things like, were you exposed to toxic chemicals?
Mm-hmm.
Were you on Camp Lejeune from 53 to 87 when they were actually dumping the dry cleaning fluid into the ground, which then went into the water tables? Or were you exposed to Agent Orange? Or, so time period tells us one thing, where you were stationed tells us another set of exposure possibilities. Korean War guys, frostbite's very common. The clothing and stuff was so inadequate, especially boots and gloves. So it depends that way. Then we're going to ask questions like, well, how are you doing financially? Do you need to get enrolled in the VA healthcare system? Are you enrolled in the VA healthcare system? And it's important that every veteran enroll, whether you want to use it or not. I had a young, early 20s come home from the sandbox, and we enrolled him right away. And he said, well, I don't need it because I'm going right back to my job. And my employer promised that I'd go right back on the health insurance. Well, a year later, he was no longer employed by that same boss, started a new job, hadn't been there long enough to get insurance. And the gentleman pulled out of his driveway and didn't see my guy on his motorcycle behind him. Yeah. So the family called me from the emergency room and said, what do we do? He doesn't have insurance. I said, I enrolled him. And under the emergency enrollment exception, the VA took over. We contacted the local hospital for VA, which is about 75 miles from here. And they called the local hospital and said, send us the bills. When he's stable enough to be transported, he has to make that choice, which took a couple months of intensive care up here, which the VA paid every bit of.
Mm-hmm.
And then they transported him down to Milwaukee, which has one of 5 premier spinal centers. And he spent probably pretty close to 6 months learning how to walk again. And he didn't have a penny in medical care costs.
And he was all taken care of because you got him enrolled in the VA healthcare. So that's really important, whether you think you need it or not, to enroll.
Yes, enroll.
Okay.
And if
can you do
are,
can you pull your mic just a little bit closer to your mouth?
Sure.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're going to be enrolled in VA healthcare system, you want to go at least once a year for their physical. Okay. Because again, when and where you served counts. They're going to look at, oh, he was stationed in Thailand and he was in the Air Force. He might have been on one of the bases with Agent Orange. So they're going to look for certain things in your blood tests that they wouldn't look for in my blood test. They're going to ask you questions neurologically because veterans are almost twice as likely to develop ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease.
Right.
So they're going to ask you little questions like, when you swallow, that little tiny muscle that controls that little flap is actually one of the most common signs of neurological difficulties when it comes to things like MS or ALS or any of that kind of stuff. That muscle is such a fine motor skill. that if you start swallowing a lot and are constantly getting water or whatever down in your lungs, it might be time to talk to your doctor about it.
Interesting, interesting. And these are all things that we should, because the veteran status runs in families, because for some families, it's almost like the family business that people are serving in the military. So these are things that we should be aware of with our parents, shouldn't we? And with ourselves and with our parents.
Yes. And the younger veterans knowing about things like the ALS development, like the War Veterans Pension Program.
Mhm.
It's time for dad or mom to start thinking about going into assisted living where they're getting in-home care services. That pension program, if the veteran served during a wartime, may be able to provide some supplemental income, is over $2,300 a month for a married couple toward those major medical bills that they're experiencing. I have veterans, like I said, the youngest I put on the program was in his 20-something. So when he came home, due to his brain injury and his spinal injury, he will never work. But because he was so young, he didn't qualify for Social Security disability. So he got Social Security supplemental income, which at that time was like $880.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's not a lot to live off of.
No.
He could take care of his day-to-day tasks as far as, getting up, getting breakfast and things like that. But his parents rented him part of a house, a couple of houses down from them. And then mom went over every day and made sure his medicines were laid out. And they remembered, okay, at 1:00, I'm picking you up for the doctor. At 3:00, we're going to go do this. And that way he could have his independence, but he had what we call fiduciary, someone taking care of him, someone doing his checkbook for him and things like that.
Okay, that's awesome. So my question is, and this is kind of a selfish question, but I think it applies to more people besides me. So the War Veterans Pension Program, the spouse, the survive. So say dad is the veteran and he's deceased, but the surviving spouse still qualifies for a portion of that, correct? If
Yes.
they need health care?
Yes, if she is a surviving spouse, it doesn't matter whether she needs health care. She has no age limit. She has no health requirements as far as disability. For the veteran, it's under 65, permanently disabled, not by the military.
Mm-hmm.
And for over 65 for a veteran, it doesn't matter once you're over 65. So for the surviving spouse, I mean, I have a 40-something-year-old that I had assisted getting on it. She qualified for a year just based on his final medical expenses and his funeral and the dramatic change in income for the household. So we were able to subtract his final expenses and such, and she got a full year of the full benefit because it meant her living upside down, shall we say, financially.
Right. Wow. There are so many ins and outs to this, so that if you are a veteran and you have any questions, it seems like a trip to a veteran service officer is in order.
Yes. The easiest way to find one is simply go to va.gov.
Mm-hmm.
And in the search, put accreditation.
Right.
And you have to make sure you spell it right.
Right.
Or put OGC space accreditation.
OGC space.
Yes,
Okay.
the Office of General Counsel is the one that approves accreditations.
Okay.
They make sure you've been through your training. They make sure that they've run a background check. They know you're not a con artist from California or something. And please, California, don't take me badly. That's the way it came out. But they approve them. And if they get enough reports that you're doing bad things, like charging people,
mm-hmm.
because we're all veterans I'm retired. All accredited veteran service officers are veterans. And so they speak a lot of the military occupational languages and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we have the sense of family. We're just taking care of each other.
Right.
That's all we're doing.
And so that's why. So you say to go there, and that people can find a list then
Yes,
of the accredited VSOs near them.
right. If you do the accreditation thing, it's going to bring you to the main page. And that's going to describe what a VSO is, what they go through to get to be a VSO. There's also people called claims agents.
Mm-hmm.
They are a VSO, but they are not necessarily a veteran.
Okay.
But they have to go through the training and such, but they can also charge you for their services.
Oh, interesting.
So you will find quite often that claims agents also do financial advising.
Imagine that.
Yeah. Oh, you're a little over on the asset side of the house. Well, we can rearrange things so you qualify. The problem there is some of them are not fiduciary in that they have to make the decisions that are good for you. And then 10 years down the road, mom needs to get a hold of the money that they tied up when dad was still alive, and now they can't.
Mm-hmm.
So and then there's all sorts of rules. A couple of years ago, they put in a 3-year look back. Medicaid has a 5-year.
Right.
Well, now the VA has a 3-year because these financial advisors were saying, oh, well, we'll invest the money over here and then it doesn't count. So now you can get out of the VA pension. And so VA said, no, 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 no. That's not proper. So claims agents can oftentimes, you'll find, do both things.
Okay, that's interesting.
There are, I'd say half of them don't do that, but they do charge. So if it takes 2 years for your claim to get through the VA, they're going to get 20% maybe of your back pay.
Wow.
Whereas with a veteran service officer, we don't charge. I never charged a penny to people. And so then there are the VA lawyers. Now, some people will say, oh, well, my case is complicated. I should start with a VA lawyer. Most VA lawyers will not take a case from the initial start because they are too busy arguing at the Board of Veterans Appeals. They are standing in front of judges and doing their arguments, just like a legal claim would be.
Mm-hmm.
But only it's a panel, not a single judge. So the decision made is by a panel, so it no longer is precedent setting.
Interesting. Okay.
So now I've used a very awesome, incredible veterans lawyer. Her name is Katrina Eagle, and she won the only glioblastoma case that I know of, brain cancer for a Vietnam veteran while the veteran was still alive.
Wow.
Glioblastoma generally is a death sentence.
Yes.
And usually within less than a year. But from start to finish, I filed my 2 cases, filed with expedite request based on cancer, terminal condition, got my answer in a couple weeks, turned around and filed my initial appeal, which reopens the case or looks at the case again with a fresh set of eyes. And again, they turned us down as expected. And then I turned around and handed it off to Katrina. And she has a genomic oncologist out in California who flew my guy out. They did all these tests and did all this blood work and broke it down to the genome level and said, this man should never have developed cancer of any kind, much less brain cancer. And wrote a 30-page opinion with all these studies and everything in it. And she took it to the Board of Veterans Appeals, and they went, can't argue that one. And they awarded him. But that doesn't set a precedent. So the VA doesn't have to award the next guy or the next widow.
Interesting.
And unless that next person or widow knows how to go about getting this type of research done, they're out of luck.
Wow, that's frustrating. So speaking, this is one of the questions that I got, because I told people to be in touch with me if they couldn't be on live with us. So I have two questions from people. And the first question that I want to ask you is what somebody needs to do to get their VA healthcare started. This person wants to know, will their information from the military treatment facility just transfer seamlessly to the VA, or do they need to make a new start with their healthcare?
It's supposed to, if they've recently gotten out. And
Okay.
if they're in one of the 5 regions of the United States, there's 5 regions. And 3 of them right now, or at least 3 of them when I left a year and a half ago, could talk to each other. So you could get out of service here in New Jersey and come back here to Wisconsin, and those 2 regions could talk to each other. So that's good. But if you went down to Florida for the winter, they wouldn't even know you were enrolled in VA healthcare.
So how do you find out if the regions are talking to each other?
Your best bet is if you are someone that is going to a different region, get on that accreditation list, call the accredited veteran service officer that you're going to, wherever your LZ, your landing zone is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
You want to get a hold of them ahead of time. Tell them you're coming. Tell them, you want to be able to enroll in VA healthcare. You're going to get your appointment. They're going to do your application for you. They'll fax it into the VA. They'll know whether or not if you go down to Florida for the winter. And, oh, by the way, we don't speak to them down there. So when you get down there, give them a copy of this and take your VA ID card in with you, and they'll enroll you.
Okay.
So we know all those little quirks and ways to work things out. It's like knowing state benefits ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
State of Wisconsin, we have an entirely separate GI Bill from the federal one. So a veteran coming home, he may say, well, I've already got my bachelor's degree from my federal GI Bill. Oh, honey, you can go for a master's here in our state.
Wow.
So, and if you're rated at 30% or greater, your dependents can use it.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
And 9 times out of 10, if you're going through a med board inside the medical system of the military, when you come home, we're going to recommend that you go and get reevaluated, because we often found that you might get a 30% rating because they're only worried about the things that make you unfit for duty. They might not do all those little things like the 10% for tinnitus. Tinnitus doesn't make you unfit for duty, so they may not even have you examined for it. So we turn around and figure out all the things that they missed, and or all the things that you can do to strengthen your case. Oh, well, you have a knee that you injured in service, and on and off it flares up, and the day you went down for your exam, it wasn't giving you too much trouble, so that's what you told the doctor. But if 3 or 4 of your buddies had written statements saying how, every once in a while your knee would swell up and you'd pack it with ice and you'd buy cheap ibuprofen over the counter rather than go on sick call, that knee shouldn't have been 10%. That knee might have been rated higher. So flare up and under medication are not allowed during a VA exam. If a veteran is examined, he's supposed to tell the doctor, at its worst, this is what it's like. But the doctor's supposed to ask that, and they don't. Sometimes that's the military side of the house. So we know that most of the time, if you come home, we're going to talk about secondaries, we're going to talk about tinnitus, we're going to talk about all these little things. And of course, it's very common when guys and gals first get home from service, they don't talk about their mental health.
Right.
And or they've learned well enough how to bury it, put it in a box, stick it in the corner of their brain, put a big rock on top of it, and it stays quiet. But then they get home and life slows down, and pretty soon they start hearing the voice from under that box. Well, these are the things that they can do. They can go to the vet center and talk to other combat veterans and never have it on the record. They can go to the mental health at the hospital. Here in Wisconsin, if a veteran wants to get into VA mental health care right away, they call it behavioral health. So if they want to get into see a counselor right away, it might be 6 weeks. The state of Wisconsin has a program to finance some care on the outside if you're in crisis. We're not going to make you wait.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so that's great. That's a start on that for that service member. And then I also had a question about VGLI, the Veterans Group Life Insurance, in comparison to civilian life insurance. And so what we have been teaching people in our Changing Focus program is that if somebody is retiring and or leaving active duty and they are in good shape physically, that they should be able to get a good a life insurance policy, a term life insurance policy at a very reasonable price.
Yes.
But there are some exceptions to that, aren't there, Jane?
Yes, there are. If you're a retiree, odds are you're not going to leave there in the best of shape. 20 years of ground pounding, especially in boots and everything else, especially if you're an artillery man or you were humping a 60 caliber, you're going to have issues, health issues, physical issues, as well as the mental health side of the house. So it isn't always easy to get insurance if you have health issues, especially major health issues. So VGLI can be beneficial. And when you are coming out, you say you did a 4-year tour, and you were lucky enough not to be in a combat situation, or you were lucky enough not to have any injuries and things. Well, 360 payments of VGLI when you're young and it's not that costly is one thing. But when you're older and it's costly, because you have to hit 360 payments before it's locked in. And, then you pay no more payments. So
in other words, so if you get out at 30, then those 360 payments start then
yes.
at $40. Whereas if you're getting out in your late 30s, that goes up to 52, and in your 40s, you're up at $68 a month. So the younger you are when you start the VGLI payments, the less you'll pay, and so then the more sense it makes.
Yes, it does. And if, like I said, if you are seriously injured and stuff like that, and you're going to have to fight to get it, and you can always just carry it for the first year or two once you get out and find an opportunity to get a better insurance. So don't drop it right away, because what if you do get home and your wife and 2 kids, and all of a sudden you're in a car accident and you're deceased? Don't let it lapse, because what's going to happen to them financially?
Right. So it's a good backup
carry it
plan
for a while. Yes, it's a good plan A.
And one of the things is, because I have the VA website up here, and if you are, it says if you're applying for VGLI between June 11th of 2020 and June 11th of 2021, you can apply without needing to have a health review to provide proof of good health for up to 330 days after you separate, which means that they increased it by 90 days from the standard period of 240 to
Right.
so that's great news because of COVID. So people still have some time.
Yes. Don't let it lapse. That's the big thing. Unfortunately, my situation, I was on the SGLI. I was injured on active duty over 45 days. My reserve unit was a very small detachment, and we were getting ready to deploy, and they basically said, "Aren't you glad you got 21 plus? Sign here, you're in the retired reserves." But it was 9 months before I got my orders. and I'd been through surgeries and everything else and didn't pay attention to the VGLI. And back then, they said, oh, you're past due. You're no longer eligible. And I'm like, wait a minute. I sent in my first payment and they sent it back and said, no, you're not out yet. You're still in. I'm like, no, I'm not. And they said, yes, you are until you get those orders. Well, 9 months later, after surgery and everything else, I got orders in the mail, and then I called them up and they said, oh, but they backdated the order, so you're no longer eligible. Don't let it lapse.
Okay.
Take care of it right away.
So I think that's, to me, is one of the most important keys in talking to you here tonight and the other time that I talk to you, is it's really important to be on top of all of this. You can't assume anything. And how early should you start when you know that you're going to be leaving active duty? How early should you start to get your VA claim ready and get into the VA system?
Well, generally speaking, you can actually start a VA claim before you leave service. A lot of times if you're not going through a med board, if you're not requesting one, and please, if you have serious health conditions that are limiting your employability, you need to talk to and make sure you are fully counseled on the medical board process. There are especially Reserve and National Guard. If you got injured on active duty, say over in the sandbox, you came back and it's 18 months later and it's getting close to the end of your contract, or you're past your 20 plus years and you're in an accident or whatever, and you're thinking about getting out, you still want to have that exit exam. You still want to have that counseling, because if your injuries from the sandbox 18 months ago are reducing your employment to the point where you're going to be rated at 30% or greater, it's going to affect your benefits as far as possibly even being medically retired with immediate benefits, as opposed to being thrown into the retired reserve and waiting till you're 60. Right now, I've been in touch with General Leslie Smith and General Dingle from the OCAR surgeon's office, and I'm working with 6 guys that should have been medically examined, should have been given med boards. Mm-hmm. 3 of them were rated 100% by the VA within less than a year of them getting out. Wow. One had a pain implant in his spine from an injury a couple years before, 2 separate IED experiences, and they didn't even give him a medical exam, much less counsel him on medical retirement. And he had over 22 years in service, and almost half of it was active duty.
Wow. So it is critical. It is really critical to get knowledgeable about this and not to take no for an answer the first time, and to keep persevering.
Yes. And if you are Reserve or National Guard, you can start your claim anytime you want. You could be 2 years away from the end of your contract and still go into the VA and get a VA rating, which then you can use, if it's high enough, to the unit and go say, look, I'm unfit for duty. I want the med board process. Doctor says I can only lift 5 pounds, that I can't wear boots, that I can't, your right shoulder is torn up, and guess what? You're right-handed. It's a little hard to shoot a weapon that way. Mm-hmm. So you need to, it's like myself. They had to put my neck back together with metal straps and screws. I wouldn't have been allowed to wear Kevlar. I've got 2 torn tendons and a torn rotator cuff in my shoulder from the injuries I suffered prior to being transferred to the retired reserves. I couldn't fire a weapon. I still can't. I just won a shotgun a couple months ago at a veteran thing, and I can't use it. So do it. National Guard, reserves, active duty. Do not let them give you an active duty medical exam a year before you're getting out and then have 2 or 3 surgeries afterwards and still get out. That was another case. They gave an AGR guy his exam with the retirement date a year out. Well, between that exam and his end date, he ended up having both shoulders operated on since he'd had injuries overseas.
Mm-hmm.
And they had just progressed to the point where finally the doctors said, okay, we're going to go ahead and we're going to clean up those shoulders and move that tendon because of the bone spurs and stuff like that. And he didn't know to ask to go back in and get a new medical exam so that he could be rated.
Because his rating was based on the medical exam that said that he was in good shape.
Right.
So key.
And the worst part, this was an AGR. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. There's active duty guys, there's reserve guys that do the one weekend, and then there are reservists that go on active duty under the active guard and reserve program.
Right.
This young man had been on the active AGR list for so long, plus he'd had 6 prior years active duty as a Marine, and he'd had a couple of years of reserve time, but deployed once during that time. So by the time we did his points, he was already qualified for an active duty retirement based on points only.
Wow.
But his unit wasn't counting his 6 years Marine Corps time when they looked at his points. So they were going to stick him in the retired reserves, which would have, for him, would have meant 14 years waiting to get his paycheck.
Wow. Jane, you are amazing. What you do for people is just fantastic. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all the veterans that you have taken care of over the years and that you're continuing to take care of. We could talk for a long time tonight, but what we're going to do is we're going to tell everybody goodbye. And we're going to thank you because we are going to come back here on a regular basis. Jane has agreed to do that with us. And so those of you who are on with us tonight, make sure that you send in your questions, put your questions in the comments on our YouTube channel. When you see it there, or when I post the video on our Facebook page, if you have questions there, post them there. You can also email them to me at admin@leadertransitioninstitute.org, and I will gather up all the questions. And when we have our next session with Jane in January or February, we'll give you great notice about it. Then we will tackle those questions and then whatever questions come in during that time. Thank you so much, Jane, for your time tonight. Thank you, everybody, for being on with us. I hope, I really appreciate the information that you've shared. It's invaluable. You are changing lives. Thank you, thank you, thank you for what you do.
Well, thank you for the time, Annie. And I just look at it as taking care of my troops. But in the meantime, I'm on LinkedIn, Jane Babcock, not difficult to find. I'm the quiet one. But find me and I can point you in the right directions. And if you have connections with anybody in national media, push them to connect with me so that I can keep pushing the elephant up the hill.
Thank you. Yes, that's an important thing. That is an important thing. Let's see what we can do.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everyone.
Thank you. Happy holidays, everybody. Bye-bye. Okay.